WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network presents the Relationship Ready Mind Talk Show with transformational life coach, Angela Kane.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Relationship Ready Mind Talk Show. My name's Angela Kane, and you're listening to WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. I'd like to thank you for joining me this evening, and I'm very excited because I want to talk to you tonight about a book that I've just written, which is called From Fear to Fabulous. And that will be on Kindle around mid-November. But the reason I wanted to talk to you about it is because it's actually the basis of the transformational process that I've been through and that I put my clients through. And at the end of it, you are transformed. The ladies that I work with, they come to me with all sorts of different problems. They can be divorced, or their partner may have died, or they have suffered some sort of abuse, or they can just be unhappy in their job. They can be lonely. There's a whole host of things that the people that I work with come to me for help with. And I've really thought about this and thought, well, what actually do I do to help these people? And so I've put it down into 7 unique transformational steps that's taken me over 20 years to put together. And at the end of it, they are different people. They come to me feeling lonely, depressed, upset. And when they've been through this process, they are changed forever. They think differently, they act differently, they are different from the inside out. And of course, when we think differently, feel differently and behave differently, we show up in the world differently, and then the world acknowledges that and things begin to change for us externally. I absolutely know, as I'm sure you probably do if you're listening to the show, that the only way we can make permanent change is to change from the inside out. So what I'd like to do over the next few weeks is talk to you about the steps that I've written down in the book that I take my clients through, because I think it will be really useful information for you, and you can start to do some of the exercises, or you might want to buy the book when it's out in November. Either way, you can always contact me and ask me some questions, and I'm, as always, more than ready to answer them and to help you in any way I can. And so first of all, I'd like to just talk to you about the steps, the 7 steps, and what they are. So first of all, the first thing we do is we identify the problem and find out what's really holding you back. The second step is what I call dance with your shadow. And it's a deep dive into the fragmented parts of your soul so that you say hello to your fears and quick step back to wholeness, because that's where we all want to get to wholeness. And when we're at that place, everything changes for us. The third step is what I call the I'm not enough syndrome. And I firmly believe it's the #1 emotional disease that women face today. Because every woman I've worked with, including myself, my friends, and people I know, everybody thinks that they're not enough, that they're not good enough, or they're not pretty enough, and so on and so on. And that holds us back in so many ways. And so I really dive deeply into that aspect of why we feel like that and what we can do about it. The next thing we do is we start to clear the blocks and the limiting beliefs. So I will teach you energy tools and techniques to clear the blocks at their root, not just put a plaster over them. We actually clear them at their root, and then they're gone for good. Step 5 is we reconnect. We start to reconnect with our true self, because we've started to understand why we are the way we are. We've started to clear our limiting beliefs, and then we begin to connect with ourself and take the journey back to essence, where we integrate the whole of us, our whole self. Step 6 is what I call the power of creation, and that's all about understanding the laws of the universe, changing our mindset and learning and understanding the mysteries of life. So the metaphysical principles that I live my life by. And lastly, on this journey, we actually then design our ideal life. We know exactly what we want to do. We've got rid of all the hang-ups and the limiting beliefs. And then we start to design the life that we really do want to live. And to do that, we ignite our purpose, passion, and pleasure so that you can create your future from a place of knowing your worth and aligning totally with the desires of your soul. So this is a very comprehensive process, and it does take work. It's not that I can guide you and I can tell you what to do and that's it, you'll change overnight. That won't happen. You do have to do the work. But if you do the work, if you work this process, it will work, absolutely, because I've seen it happen so many times with the women I work with, and also I'm living proof that it works. So let's just talk about the first step in a little more detail. We identify the problem and discover what's really holding you back. But before we do that, I'm going to take a quick break here, so don't go anywhere, and I'll be right back.
You're listening to WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network, Singles Talk Radio Channel, where we take a lighthearted and candid approach to discussions on the journey of relationship loss, divorce, parenting, being single, relationships building, dating, and yes, sex. Join our listeners and begin living your best life.
Hello and welcome back to the Relationship Ready Mind Talk Show with me, Angela Kane, and you're listening to WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. Thank you for joining me again. And so before the break, we were talking about the book that I've just written, which is called From Fear to Fabulous. And I was talking about the steps that I put my clients through and that I've also been through myself to transform into the person that I always wanted to be. And the same thing goes for my clients as well. And the first thing we need to do when we want to transform is we need to identify the problems. We need to find out what's really holding us back and deal with them. And I don't advocate going over and over and over again old wounds, but I do believe that we can't ignore them, that we have to look at them. And we look at them, we process them, we heal them, and we move on. And so how do we do that? Well, awareness is the most important thing. Awareness holds the key to the kingdom. When we're oblivious to something, we're powerless to change it. If you don't know something's happening, you can't fix it. And why is it so imperative that we get to know ourselves and to understand our hidden patterns? Well, because if we don't, our unconscious beliefs and behaviours continue to sabotage our life. The ancient Greeks said, "Know thyself." Oh my goodness, I did not have a clue who I was before I started this journey many, many years ago. And I'm still discovering more and more about myself every single day, because every single day I have a spiritual practice and I continue to work on myself. But I had no idea why I was creating all of the things that I didn't want in my life, and why I repeatedly had relationships with men who were emotionally unavailable. At those times, everything would seem rosy for a while, but then reality set in and the cracks would start to appear in the relationship. And I'd think, oh no, here we go again. Perhaps you're still in the unawareness stage of your life, that you know something's wrong and your life isn't working the way you want it to. And somehow you've tuned in to this radio show. But if you recognize yourself as that person, let me assure you that it's no accident that you're actually listening today and that you've found your way to this show. And I believe the time has come for you to embark on the journey of becoming the person you wish to become, the person you are and have always been inside, who's screaming to get out. So, first of all, let's talk about responsibility and why it's crucial that we take responsibility for our own lives. Well, you may be thinking, I cannot possibly be responsible for what's happened in my life. None of it was my fault. It was my mother's or my father's or my boss's or my partner's or whoever else you think might be to blame. However, in what follows, you're going to learn the truth. Otherwise, I'd be doing you a disservice. I'm going to tell you how it really is, and that you are responsible for your own life and everything that happens in it. Although being responsible and accepting that responsibility does not mean you're to blame. Absolutely no way are you to blame. Not at all. It's not your fault. Let's get that straight from the get-go. Because we as human beings are programmed from birth and even before to pick up on emotions from our parents, siblings, and anyone else who's in close contact with us. And we even inherit trauma from our parents and grandparents, but that's another story. We won't go into that today, but we do. You might be surprised to learn that our life operates mostly from our subconscious mind. If you've listened to other shows of mine, you'll know that I've said this before. And scientists are now telling us that as much as 96% of our life is running on autopilot from the programming that's in our subconscious mind. And when we're not conscious of what we're doing, thinking and saying, the subconscious programming is running the show. Think of your subconscious mind like a tape player. It consistently replays all of our experiences, conversations and emotions. Every experience you've ever had and will have is stored in the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is incredibly powerful. It beats our heart, it organizes our breathing, and allows us to move around without having to think about moving every single muscle independently. Thankfully, it makes it possible to function without conscious thought. Otherwise, we would become mentally exhausted very quickly. However, what's not so beneficial is that it replays every negative word and thought we have ever had about ourselves, which then feeds the voice of the inner critic. And the voice of the critic is very strong in most people, but exceptionally so in the women that I've worked with, me included in that. The subconscious mind is a great and faithful servant, but a terrible master, and we must become mindful of everything we think, say, and do if we want our life to work, as our thoughts create our feelings, and our feelings create our actions, or lack of them. The subconscious mind is in every single cell of our body. It's not just in our head, as many people believe. So to take charge of our life, we must first notice the thoughts we're thinking and then begin to reprogram our subconscious mind if the thoughts we're having on a daily basis are not making us feel good. It's taken us so many years to learn these thoughts and behaviours, but now we have to change all that. We, in effect, have to unlearn everything we've been taught throughout our life and start to reprogram the subconscious mind with new empowering, positive beliefs and messages about ourselves and the world around us. And the world around us is, in fact, nothing more than a reflection of what's going on inside us. So you may be wondering, why is this important? Well, it's important because if you don't begin to understand yourself and to realize the way you function is all down to subconscious programming and not a conscious choice, you'll be unaware that you have the capacity to change it, and you'll remain feeling stuck and powerless, feeling fear and apprehension about your life and your future. In essence, the thoughts we think create the way we feel, and the way we feel dictates our quality of life. We're told that we have on average around 70 to 80,000 thoughts per day, and of those thoughts, according to studies, around 90% of them are the same day after day. So I'm sure you can imagine the damage you're doing to yourself if you're consistently telling yourself negative, destructive things about yourself, your character, and your life. Stuff like you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, that you're stupid, that no one's interested in you, you're too old, too fat, too thin, too dull, and on it goes. Is it any wonder your life isn't working and you feel terrible, depressed, and have very little energy most of the time? But just think about all the energy you give to putting yourself down on a daily basis, and how cruel the messages are that you give to yourself. Would you speak to your best friend that way? I doubt it very much. So why do you think it's acceptable to treat yourself in that way? Under those circumstances, it's not really surprising you feel the way you feel, is it? Now, let's just turn this around for a moment, and I want you to imagine that you're only allowed to say nice, encouraging and comforting things to yourself. Wouldn't that make you feel better? I know for sure that it would. And I'm going to tell you something now that I hope you'll never forget. I'm going to tell you 3 incredibly powerful little words, and I hope you'll remember these words for the rest of your life. Thoughts become things. Yes, that's correct. Thoughts become things. And I mean that quite literally. Thoughts become things, and not just sometimes, but all of the time. With every thought you think and every word you speak, you're creating your life. And if you haven't heard this before, you may think it's quite radical. However, let me assure you this isn't bad news. It's great news, because they're your thoughts. And every minute of every day, you get to choose what to think. So if the thoughts you've been thinking have not brought you the things, people, and circumstances that you want in your life, then you have the power to change it. And I'm not telling you that this is easy, but I am telling you that it's simple and it's possible. I know, because I've done it. But we have to learn how to put this process into practice. And as I said earlier, we need to find out how to reprogram our subconscious mind, and we need to do this the right way. And it's very important that we learn to do it the right way so that we can reap the benefit of living with a controlled mind. Most people have a very uncontrolled mind, which causes all sorts of problems. And if this is the case for you, you can change that. You can start to retrain your mind, and you can start today. In fact, it's absolutely essential that you do that if you want to live a happy and fruitful life. Every situation in your life is neither good nor bad. It just is. But you make it so by the meaning that you give it. Something that you consider to be a terrible situation may not be a terrible situation to someone else. Subjective. We give a situation a particular meaning because of the lens that we see our world through, which really is just our perception. And everybody's perception of the world is different. We are, in effect, slaves to the emotional states that we've memorized from past experiences. But when we're living in the present moment, that is when we open the door to the quantum field of possibility, because everything happens in the now moment. And what's even more interesting is the brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined when you're really focused. You know yourself, when you cry watching a sad movie or feel fear and tension while watching a horror film, we know logically that this is just a movie, it's not really happening. However, our brain produces the same chemical reaction as if we're experiencing that fear or sadness in our life. This is because we're absorbed in the story, and so the corresponding emotions, like tears, show up, or you get the butterflies in your stomach because you're feeling fear. And this is what happens in life. We're so involved and identified with our story that we think that is who we are. Similarly, if you visualize or mentally rehearse a situation of great joy, your body will produce those corresponding emotions, whether or not they're happening in your mind or in your physical world. In quantum physics, it's said perception is projection, or as viewed, so appears. And the quantum field is the universe. It's the field of all possibility. It's where we create everything that happens in our life. And how we see the world and how we see each situation is actually creating that situation. It's been discovered that no experiments can be carried out in quantum physics without an observer present, because the observer affects the outcome, which means our mind has an effect on the world around us. The observer effect states that where your attention goes, energy flows. And as a consequence of this, you affect your material world. If we take Einstein's word that everything in the universe is made up of energy, including me and you, doesn't it make sense to put your attention and your energy on what you want rather than what you perceive with your five senses, which only looks at the world from a very limited perspective? That's an interesting concept, isn't it? However, it's not just a concept. It happens to be true. And so we're going to leave it there as we've run out of time for today. But I hope you've enjoyed that excerpt from my new book, From Fear to Fabulous, which isn't out yet. It's out in November. And I do hope that you'll join me again next week when I'll be discussing more aspects from the book and how, by using the principles in it, you can start to transform your life. So thank you so much for listening today. I wish you all a wonderful week, and I hope that you will be able to join me again next week for more interesting and metaphysical conversations. So thank you so much, everyone. My name's Angela Kane. If you want to drop me a line, you can click on the Ask Angela button on the page, or you can send me an email to angela@angelakane.com, or you can visit my website, which is www.angelakane.com. Please do keep your emails coming, because I love to read your emails. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask me, then please don't hesitate. Thank you so much. You've been listening to WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network, and the Relationship Ready Mind talk show with me, Angela Kane. Take care and bye for now.